The following account is constructed from the official, and until now, unreleased FBI file on the incident, which contains the complete psychiatric evaluation of Samuel Kane and the full, chilling transcript of his only formal interview. Right. Okay. I know how this sounds, Agent. Just hear me out. We moved in October, the second week. The house was cold, filled with that damp cellar smell of a place that's been locked up too long. My parents' things were still there, covered in white sheets like rows of polite ghosts. I spent the first week just unpacking the essentials. Jenny's room first, of course. Her toys, her bed. The rest, most of it just stayed in the boxes. It felt pointless to unpack, like admitting this was permanent. Most days I'd just sit in the living room. The tape player was the first thing I set up. Played The Cure, mostly. Pornography seemed appropriate. The TV got 3 channels, all fuzzy, and every evening the news was full of it. That satanic panic stuff. Stories about daycare centers and cults in the woods. I remember watching it, thinking it was a world away. Just noise to fill the silence. The quiet out there, in Cass. It's a physical thing. It presses in on you. I thought that's what I wanted, to be hollowed out by the quiet. The strangeness started small, insignificant, I thought. After maybe the 3rd or 4th day, I found a dead squirrel on the porch steps. Its neck was broken, but there was no other mark on it, no blood. It was just laid out, staged almost. I figured it was a bobcat, or maybe a fox leaving its leftovers. I took a shovel, tossed it into the woods, and didn't think much of it. But the next morning there was a rabbit. Same thing. Laid out perfectly in the center of the welcome mat, like a package delivery. Neck snapped clean. Its eyes were open and glassy. I remember the cold morning air, the smell of damp earth, and just staring at this offering. Again, I told myself it was just nature. Vicious, maybe, but normal. Wild animals do this. I swept it up and buried this one a little deeper. It became a ritual. Every morning I'd step outside, my coffee in hand, and do a perimeter check. I started feeling a knot in my stomach as I turned the doorknob. Most days there was nothing. But then, maybe twice that first week, I'd find one. Another rabbit. A chipmunk. Always the same. Neatly placed. It wasn't messy, and that's what was getting to me. It felt deliberate. Sleep doesn't come easy. It hasn't for a long time. That night, the house was making noises, the old wood groaning in the cold, and I gave up trying. I went downstairs, looking for a book, anything. I ended up just kneeling on the floor, pulling open a dusty box labeled Photos. The first one I picked up was of my parents, standing by their old Buick, squinting in the sun. 4 years ago. A week later, a patch of black ice on a mountain road turned that car into a coffin of mangled metal and broken glass. I remember the coroner at the morgue telling me I didn't have to identify them. I insisted. I wish I hadn't. Underneath it was a picture of my sister, Sarah. We were kids, missing teeth, grinning on a porch swing. The hospital smell came back to me. That sharp, sterile scent I can't get out of my nose. She survived the crash, you see, for a while. They told me the amputations were necessary to save her, both legs. I sat by her bed for a month, listening to the quiet beeps of the machines, watching her fade. She never really woke up. Her body just quit. Then there was the trouble with Kate, my wife. After the funerals, she grew distant. Cold. I thought it was the grief. I told her we'd get away, take Jenny to the ocean. But it wasn't grief, it was guilt. A mutual friend finally slipped me an envelope full of Polaroids. grainy, sordid little squares showing her and Val Nash, Jenny's judo instructor, in a cheap motel room. Of course I confronted her. There were fights, tears, promises. I gave her a second chance, a third. I was a fool. I came home early from work one day and found them in our bed. I didn't even yell. I just felt nothing. A profound, hollowed-out silence. I started packing a bag. Val scurried out like the rat he was. Kate had a full-blown meltdown. She climbed onto the windowsill of our 17th floor apartment, half naked, screaming that she'd jump if I left. I tried to talk to her, told her she was free, that I'd take care of Jenny. A slip, a gust of wind, I don't know. I just saw her silhouette against the sky, a silk robe fluttering, and then she was gone. I sat there on that cold wooden floor in that cold, quiet house, holding the pictures. Proof. I wasn't just running from a ghost. I was running from an entire graveyard I carried inside me. I was trying, for Jenny, trying to make it normal. A few days later, the weather cleared up, a rare burst of autumn sun. I told her we'd go for a picnic just down the hill by the edge of the woods. She was so excited. That kid. After everything, she could still find joy in a peanut butter sandwich and a bottle of juice. We spread out an old blanket under a huge maple tree, its leaves the color of fire. The air was crisp. Jenny was chattering away, happier than I'd seen her in months. She was digging in the picnic basket when she pulled out this thing. A small doll, woven from dried grass and straw, tied with red yarn. "Look what Marika made me," she said, holding it up with this incredible pride. I took it from her. It felt rough, scratchy. "Pretty," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "Who's Marika?" Jenny looked at me like I was the stupidest person on earth. She told me I knew who Marika was, that she'd told me about her before. She said Marika was her new best friend. Her tall, pretty friend who was all white, like a birch tree. And when I asked where this friend lived, Jenny just pointed a chubby finger towards the dense, dark wall of the Monongahela National Forest. "In there," she said, matter-of-factly. I gave the doll back to her and told myself it was nothing. Just a kid's imagination running wild in a new, lonely place. It had to be. That night, the phone rang. The sound was so jarring in the silence of the house, it felt like a violation. I picked up the receiver in the kitchen, the long, coiled cord stretching across the linoleum. It was Kate's mother. Her voice sounded thin and strained over the crackle of the long-distance line. She asked about Jenny, the usual polite chatter. But then her husband, George, got on the line. He didn't waste time. He told me Val Nash had shown up at their house, unannounced. He said Val was a mess, crying, begging for forgiveness for not saving Kate from me. He said they'd had to threaten to call the police to get him to leave. And then, the part that made the cold kitchen floor seem to drop out from under me. George said that before he left, Val had been screaming, asking for my new address. He told them he knew I'd run off to my parents' old place in West Virginia. He knew exactly where we were. George told me to be careful, to watch out for Jenny. I remember hanging up the phone and just standing there in the dark. The one thing I'd run 1,000 miles to escape from, the violence and the ugliness of my old life. It knew my address. It was reaching for me, even here. I looked out the window, at the black, impenetrable wall of the woods, and I didn't know which threat scared me more. I think I slept that night. I'm not sure. But I remember dreaming. It's the only word for it, even if it felt more real than being awake. I was back there, at the overlook where Kate fell. but it wasn't the same. The sky was a deep, bruised twilight, and the trees surrounding the cliff were the wild, tangled hemlocks from the forest behind my house. The air smelled of pine needles and decay. Kate was there. She was yelling at me, her words lost in a wind that roared in my ears. I saw her step back onto the low stone wall, and as she teetered there, her face, twisted in anger, seemed to melt. For just a second, it wasn't her. It was something else. Pale, white as bone, and her blue eyes flashed a brilliant, sickly yellow. Then she fell, down into the impossible darkness. But this time, there was a sound. Not her scream. It was a laugh. A high, tinkling, childish laugh that seemed to echo up from the abyss. I woke up sweating, my heart hammering against my ribs. The sound of the laugh was still in the room. It must have been 1 or 2 in the morning. The dream had left me raw, shaken. I went downstairs to get a glass of water, my hand trembling slightly. I was standing at the kitchen sink, looking out the window over the yard, when I saw it. At the far edge of the property, right where the manicured grass gave way to the wild tangle of the woods, a figure was standing by the old wire fence. It was tall and slender, wearing what looked like a long, white dress or nightgown. It was too dark to see a face, any real details. Just a pale, vertical shape against the blackness of the trees. And it was perfectly still. That's what got me. Not a sway, not a shiver in the cold night air. Just watching. I watched for what felt like 10 minutes, my heart a slow, heavy drum in my chest. It was no tree. It had arms. It had a head. It was just standing there, watching my house. The next morning, I was exhausted, on edge. I made Jenny breakfast, trying to act normal. She was playing on the floor with her straw doll while I washed the dishes. She was humming to herself, a little tune I didn't recognize. Then she said it, just out of the blue, talking more to the doll than to me. Marika brings us presents, but Daddy keeps throwing them away. I stopped. The water was running over my hands, but I couldn't feel it. I turned around, slowly. The squirrel, the rabbit, the watcher in the white dress. My mind connected the dots with a sickening, audible click. "Jenny," I said, my voice hoarse. "What kind of presents does Marika bring?" She looked up at me, her expression perfectly innocent. "The sleepy ones," she said, "for the porch." It wasn't a bobcat. It wasn't some local weirdo. The thing in the woods was leaving those dead animals. It was feeding us, or trying to, and it was my daughter's best friend. I had to get the trash out. It was Tuesday. The big metal dumpsters were down at the bottom of our long gravel driveway near the main road. I was wrestling a couple of heavy black bags out of the can when an old pickup truck, rusted to hell, rattled to a stop. An old man got out. Someone I'd only ever seen from a distance. Eli Henderson, I think his name was. He nodded at me, a curt mountain greeting. I don't know why I said it. Maybe I was just desperate to have someone tell me I was crazy. "Morning," I started, trying to sound casual. "Say, you ever see a young woman walking around here at night? Tall, wears a white dress?" He stopped what he was doing and gave me a long, hard look. There was no amusement in his eyes, no dismissal, just a flat, serious appraisal. He told me he'd lived on this mountain for 73 years. He said there's things in these woods that ain't on any map. He told me if I saw a woman in white by the tree line, especially at night, that wasn't no woman. He said that was a haint, a spirit, something that belonged to the forest, and that they get curious sometimes, especially about children. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You keep that little girl of yours close, son." Some things, they ain't content just to watch. I fell asleep in the armchair, a book open on my chest. The next thing I knew, a small hand was on my shoulder, shaking me gently. The room was pitch black. "Daddy!" Jenny's voice was a whisper, right by my ear. "Daddy, wake up." My brain was thick with sleep. "She's here," Jenny whispered, a strange excitement in her voice. "Marika came to visit. I told her she could." A jolt of ice-cold adrenaline shot through me. I sat bolt upright. The room was silent except for the wind outside. I put a finger to my lips, then slowly, carefully, I stood up. I took Jenny's hand. It was cold. I guided her behind me, moving toward the hallway that led to the front door. Every instinct screamed at me to grab Jenny and run, but where? Then I saw them, in a single shaft of moonlight slanting through the hall window. Footprints. Small, bare, and glistening wet on the dark wood of the floor. They led from the front door, which was slightly ajar, into the shadows of the living room. I froze, listening. The house was utterly silent. So quiet, I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. And then, from the main staircase just a few feet away, a single floorboard groaned. She was in my house. I pushed Jenny behind me, my body rigid, and peered into the living room. She was standing in the doorway that led to the dining room, framed in shadow. She was tall, dressed in a simple white shift. Her long dark hair was crowned with a wreath of what looked like wilted daisies. She was almost pretty, in a strange pale way. She looked at me, a shy little smile playing on her lips. For a heartbeat, my fear subsided, replaced by utter confusion. This was just a girl, a lost, confused girl. I opened my mouth to say something, to ask if she was okay. And then she smiled wider. The smile just kept stretching, impossibly wide, tearing the skin at the corners of her mouth. There was a soft, wet clicking sound, and her jaw seemed to unhinge, splitting her pretty face into a grotesque, gaping maw. It was filled with teeth. Not human teeth. Rows and rows of them, thin and sharp as needles, like a deep-sea fish. Her eyes, the ones I thought were gentle brown, blazed with a sudden sulfur-yellow light. Her pupils contracted into thin, black, vertical slits. It wasn't a girl. My God, it wasn't human. The scream that tore out of my throat was raw, animal. "Get out!" The thing's smile faltered. The monstrous mouth closed, folding back into the shape of a girl's lips. The yellow light in its eyes dimmed, and its expression crumpled into something that looked horrifyingly like hurt. A childish, wounded look. It made a soft whimpering sound, turned, and then it was just gone, vanished from the doorway. I heard the front door bang open and slam shut. Then I felt a sharp pain in my side. I looked down. Jenny was hitting me with her tiny fists, tears streaming down her face. "You hurt her," she sobbed, her voice filled with betrayal. "You were mean. You hurt Marika." Before I could grab her, she darted away from me. She ran to the front door, wrenched it open, and disappeared into the pitch-black yard, screaming a name that wasn't a name. "Marika, wait, don't go." Panic. Cold. Absolute. I didn't think. I just ran. Out the door, off the porch. Bare feet on cold, wet grass. "Jenny!" I screamed into the darkness. "Jenny, come back!" The only answer was the sound of my daughter's cries, fading as she ran toward the black wall of the forest. I stumbled around the corner of the house, my eyes frantically scanning the darkness toward the woods, screaming her name. I was so focused on the tree line, I didn't see the shadow detach itself from the deep darkness of the porch. "Looking for someone?" The voice was a low growl. I spun around. It was Val Nash. Bigger than I remembered, his thick neck and shoulders blocking out the faint light from the house. He looked like a bull, nostrils flared, radiating a pure distilled hatred. "Val," I gasped, taking a step back. "What the hell are you doing here?" "What I should have done the day she died," he snarled, taking a step forward for every one I took back. "She's dead because of you. You pushed her, you killed her, and you ran." "That's not what happened," I started, my voice weak, my mind still reeling from the thing in the house. "You need to leave." He laughed, a short, ugly bark. "I'm not going anywhere." Before I could react, he lunged. His fist felt like a brick hitting my jaw. A flash of white light exploded behind my eyes, and the world tilted sideways. I hit the wet ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me. I tasted blood and dirt. Through the ringing in my ears, my only thought was Jenny. I tried to push myself up, to crawl, to do anything, but a steel-toed boot slammed into my ribs. I heard a sickening crack, and a universe of white-hot pain erupted in my side. I curled into a ball, gasping for air that wouldn't come. "You're pathetic," he spat, his shadow looming over me. Another kick landed in my stomach and I retched. "You let her die. You couldn't even be a man." He drew his leg back for another kick, and all I could do was lie there, waiting for it. My world shrinking to the blinding pain and the single terrifying thought, Jenny is in the woods. And then, from the woods, came a sound. It wasn't a roar, not like any animal I'd ever heard. It was a high, thin, piercing shriek of absolute rage. It cut through the night, through the ringing in my ears, and froze the world. Val froze, his leg, poised to kick, lowered slowly. His head snapped toward the darkness, his mouth hanging slightly open. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. He didn't get an answer. A blur of white exploded from the tree line. It wasn't a run, it was a launch, an impossible, predatory leap that covered the 50 yards of my lawn in a silent, terrifying instant. Before Val could even turn his body, it was on him. I heard a wet, tearing sound, like a canvas sail ripping in a hurricane, followed immediately by the sharp, sickening snap of a large bone. Val didn't roar anymore. He shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony and terror that I will hear in my nightmares until the day I die. Something warm and wet spattered across my face. Through the swimming haze of pain, I pushed myself up onto one elbow. Marika had him. She had one of his arms in her hands and was twisting. He was a big man, strong, but he was a child's doll in her grip. She threw him, not pushed him, threw him across the yard. He hit the side of the house with a meaty thud that vibrated through the ground. The glass in the kitchen window rattled in its frame. He tried to crawl away, dragging a useless leg behind him, sobbing and pleading. She was on him again in a single bound, her white gown now stained with huge, dark blotches. She wasn't making a sound. There was just this terrible, focused silence as she worked. I saw her lift him by the throat, his legs kicking feebly, and slam him back against the wall again and again. The sound of splintering wood and crunching bone. Through it all, I saw a small shape dart out from the trees. Jenny. Crying, she ran to me, not to the monster. She buried her face in my chest, her small body trembling uncontrollably. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close, trying to shield her eyes from the monster in our yard and the terrible, wet work it was finishing. The next thing I remember clearly is the sun. Bright, golden autumn sun, pouring through the trees. It felt obscene. I was sitting on the top step of the porch, Jenny asleep in my lap, wrapped in the old woolen blanket I kept by the door. My body was a symphony of pain. Every breath was a sharp, stabbing reminder of my broken ribs. My jaw ached with a deep, throbbing pulse. A car door slammed. I looked up. wincing as the bright light hit my eyes. It was them. Kate's parents, George and Eleanor. Their sensible Buick was parked at the end of the driveway, and they were walking toward the house, their faces etched with a familiar, weary concern. Eleanor saw me first. A hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, dear God, Samuel," she gasped, rushing forward. George's eyes took in the scene. Me, battered and bruised. The dark, ugly stains on the grass and the side of the house. The splintered wood on the wall. He stopped a few feet away, his face pale. "Son," he said, his voice quiet. "What happened here?" I looked down at Jenny's sleeping face, her blonde hair catching the morning sun. I looked out at the peaceful, sun-drenched yard. Then I looked toward the silent, watchful line of the woods. There was no body. There was no evidence. Just stains that could have been rust or spilled paint. Just a story no one in their right mind would ever believe. The investigation was officially concluded by the Pocahontas County Sheriff's Department, with this bureau providing advisory oversight. The subject, Samuel Kane, was treated for multiple contusions and 2 fractured ribs. The child, Jennifer Kane, was physically unharmed. A thorough search of the property and the surrounding woods yielded no trace of Valentine Nash. He remains on file as a missing person. Forensic analysis of the scene did, however, produce several anomalous findings that are inconsistent with the official narrative of a simple disappearance. The dark stains on the house's siding and the lawn were confirmed to be human blood, type O negative, consistent with Nash's medical records. The sheer volume of blood spatter suggests a fatal and exceptionally violent event. Furthermore, a detailed report from the medical examiner's field team noted that the damage to the house's wooden siding, deep gouges and splintering, could not be replicated by standard tools and would require the application of immense, focused force. A strange, phosphorescent organic residue was found collected in these indentations. Lab analysis has been unable to identify its origin. The straw doll recovered from the child's room was found to be woven with strands of human hair. DNA analysis confirmed the hair did not belong to the victim, nor to any member of the Kane family. Official conclusion? Valentine Nash was the victim of a homicide perpetrated by an unknown subject or subjects. The case remains open, pending new evidence. Samuel Kane and his daughter left the state approximately 1 week after the incident, and their current whereabouts are unknown. As a final unofficial addendum to this file, during our final interview, the child, Jennifer Kane, was given paper and crayons by the department's psychologist. She drew a picture. It was a family portrait, a stick figure of her father, one of herself, and holding their hands, a tall, smiling woman with bright yellow eyes.